The Austin skyline sparkled through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Meridian Tower's 42nd floor. But all I could focus on was the amber liquid swirling in my whiskey glass. 200 of Austin's finest corporate elite mingled around me in their designer gowns and $1,000 suits, celebrating another record quarter for Halverson Technologies. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was the forensic accountant who'd helped cook those books to perfection, and nobody in this room had a clue. Jason Fairburn, right? The voice belonged to Richard Halverson himself, our illustrious CEO. 6'2", silver-haired, with the kind of predatory smile that made shareholders weak in the knees and employees check their wallets. Mind if I borrow your wife for the evening? I nearly choked on my drink. Laura stood beside him in a red dress that cost more than most people's monthly rent, her perfectly manicured hand resting on his arm like she owned the place, which, considering recent developments, she probably thought she did. Excuse me, I managed, though my voice came out smaller than I'd intended. Richard's grin widened. Oh, come on, Fairburn. Don't play dumb. Laura's been keeping me company after hours for months now. Excellent work, by the way. He squeezed her waist possessively. Tonight, she's coming home with me. Unless, of course, you'd prefer to clean out your desk Monday morning. The conversations around us had died. 200 pairs of eyes locked onto our little drama, waiting to see how the company cuckold would respond. Laura's laugh tinkled like breaking glass. Oh, Jason, she said, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. Don't look so shocked. You had to know this was coming. I mean, when was the last time you satisfied anyone, including yourself? More laughter rippled through the crowd. My face burned, but inside, something cold and calculating clicked into place. These people had no idea what they'd just unleashed. Fine by me, Laura continued, adjusting Richard's tie with intimate familiarity. At least Dick knows how to treat a woman properly. The crowd erupted in barely suppressed snickers. Someone whispered brutal behind me. Another voice muttered something about, poor bastard. I stood there, drink in hand, watching my wife publicly humiliate me in front of everyone who mattered in Austin's tech scene. Well, Richard prompted, clearly enjoying himself. What's it going to be, Fairburn? Accept reality or start job hunting? I drained my whiskey in one burning gulp and set the glass down with deliberate care. The crowd leaned in, expecting tears, begging, maybe even violence. Instead, I smiled. You know what, Dick? I said, using his preferred nickname with just enough emphasis to make it sound like an insult. I think this calls for a toast. I grabbed a champagne flute from a passing waiter and raised it high. The room went dead silent. To my loving wife Laura, I announced, my voice carrying clearly across the marble floor, and to our esteemed CEO, who's about to discover that some women are more expensive than others. Laura's face went white. Richard's confident smirk faltered slightly. To loyalty, I continued, meeting Richard's eyes directly, and to getting exactly what you deserve. I drained the champagne, set the flute down, and walked toward the elevator. Behind me, the crowd buzzed with confused murmurs. As the elevator doors closed, I caught a glimpse of Laura and Richard huddled together, her expression worried, his annoyed. Time to give them a show they'll never forget, I thought, as the elevator descended toward the parking garage. But first, let's see how Dick likes his Tesla, with a few modifications. The thing about being a forensic accountant is that people underestimate you. They see the glasses, the quiet demeanor, the guy who gets excited about spreadsheets, and they assume you're harmless. What they don't realize is that my job involves hunting down liars, cheats, and thieves for a living. I'm very good at finding dirt, and even better at knowing exactly what to do with it once I find it. Richard's Tesla Model S sat in his reserved spot like a metallic blue monument to his ego. The vanity plate read COLF because subtlety had never been Dick's strong suit. I pulled out my phone and started recording. October 15th, 11:47 p.m., I narrated quietly, documenting the condition of vehicle belonging to Richard Halverson, CEO of Halverson Technologies. Vehicle appears to be in pristine condition. I walked around the car slowly, filming every angle. Then I reached into my jacket and pulled out a small screwdriver, the same one I'd been carrying since Laura's late nights at the office started 3 months ago. The first scratch ran from headlight to taillight, along the driver's side. The second carved cheater into the hood. The third, my personal favorite, etched Small Dick Energy across the rear windshield. Vehicle has sustained significant cosmetic damage, I continued recording. Estimated repair cost, $15,000 to $20,000, cause unknown. I pocketed the screwdriver and pulled out a small knife. 4 quick slashes, and all his tires were flat. Not slashed dramatically, just small punctures that would leave him stranded but wouldn't scream revenge. Additionally, vehicle appears to have tire damage consistent with road hazards, I noted. Driver will likely require towing service. The parking garage echoed with my footsteps as I walked back to my own car, a sensible Honda Accord that Laura constantly mocked as Suburban Dad Mobile. Tonight, that Suburban Dad Mobile felt like a getaway car. I'd been planning this moment for weeks, ever since I'd discovered the real reason the board had hired me. They didn't just want a routine audit of the company's books, they wanted someone to investigate suspected fraud, embezzlement, and what the board chairman had delicately termed executive misconduct. What they'd gotten was a front-row seat to the CEO screwing his employees in more ways than one. The drive home took me through the heart of Austin's tech corridor, past the gleaming towers where fortunes were made and lost daily. Laura and I lived in Westlake Hills, one of those gated communities where the houses all looked like they'd been designed by the same architect on the same day after the same 3-martini lunch. Our house was dark when I pulled into the driveway. Laura wouldn't be coming home tonight. She'd made that clear enough. I sat in the car for a moment, looking at the place we'd called home for 8 years, where we'd planned to raise our daughters Beth and Janie before the divorce had sent them to live with Laura's sister in Dallas. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Saw what happened tonight. You okay? Diana. Diana Reeves, senior software engineer, sharp as a blade, and one of the few people at Halverson Tech who'd never treated me like furniture. We'd worked together on several projects, and I'd always suspected she saw through the corporate bullshit better than most. I typed back. Been better. Thanks for asking. Her response came immediately. Dick and Laura deserve each other. You deserve better. You have no idea how much better I'm about to get, I thought. But I just sent back a simple, thanks. Inside the house, I went straight to my home office and pulled out a locked filing cabinet. Inside were months of carefully gathered evidence. Bank statements, email printouts, photographs, and most importantly, audio recordings. Laura had always been careless about phone calls. She'd conduct her most sensitive conversations right in front of me, assuming I wasn't listening or was too stupid to understand the implications. She was wrong on both counts. I plugged in my digital recorder and scrolled to my favorite track, recorded just 2 weeks ago, while Laura thought I was asleep on the couch. When do I get my cut, Dick? Laura's voice was crystal clear. I've been moving money around for 6 months now. The forensic guy Jason hasn't noticed anything, but he's not exactly the sharpest tool in the shed. Richard's laughter came through clearly. Don't worry, baby. Once we wrap up this audit nonsense, we'll be set. Your husband's report will give us exactly the cover we need. What about the board? What about them? They hired your idiot husband to investigate me, and he's going to tell them exactly what I want them to hear. It's perfect. I'd listened to that recording probably 50 times, and it still made my blood boil. Not just because of the betrayal, though that stung, but because of how completely they'd underestimated me. The board hadn't just hired me to investigate Richard. They'd hired me because they suspected Richard was using his position to embezzle funds, and they needed someone smart enough to find the evidence, but trustworthy enough not to leak it to the press prematurely. What they didn't know was that Laura had been helping him do it, using her position in HR to access employee accounts and move money around. What Laura and Richard didn't know was that I'd been documenting every transaction, every transfer, every fraudulent entry for months. I had enough evidence to put them both in prison for the next decade. But prison was too easy, too clean. They'd humiliated me publicly, destroyed my marriage, and stolen money that belonged to hard-working employees. They deserved something more personal. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a photo message from an unknown number. Richard and Laura in the elevator of what looked like the Four Seasons, his hands all over her head thrown back in laughter. The message read, "Thought you should see this. They're in the penthouse suite. A friend." I smiled and saved the photo to my evidence folder. Tomorrow was Saturday. Laura would probably spend the day at Richard's place, and I'd have the whole weekend to prepare for phase 2 of my plan. But first, I wanted to see how Dick reacted to his new automotive situation. Saturday morning brought the most beautiful sound I'd heard in months. Richard Halverson absolutely losing his mind in the Meridian Tower parking garage. I'd arrived early and positioned myself in the coffee shop across the street, with a perfect view of the executive parking level through the floor-to-ceiling windows. At exactly 9:15 a.m., Richard strutted out of the elevator in his weekend casual uniform, designer jeans that probably cost more than most people's rent, and a polo shirt that screamed, "I own a yacht." His confident swagger lasted exactly 12 seconds, which was how long it took him to reach his mutilated Tesla. Even from across the street, I could see him freeze. Then he started circling the car like a predator stalking wounded prey, his phone pressed to his ear. I couldn't hear the words, but his body language told the whole story. Shock, rage, and the dawning realization that someone had just declared war on him. My own phone rang. Laura's number. "Jason, where the hell are you?" Her voice was sharp, panicked. "Someone vandalized Dick's car last night. The police want to talk to you." "Good morning to you too, honey," I said, stirring my coffee slowly. "I'm having breakfast. Why would the police want to talk to me?" "Don't play stupid. Everyone saw what happened at the gala last night. You threatened Dick in front of 200 people." I replayed my words from the previous evening. I don't recall making any threats. I made a toast to loyalty, if memory serves. "Oh, Jason, I'm serious. Where were you after you left the party?" "I came home, alone, unlike some people." I let that hang in the air for a moment. "Speaking of which, how was your night at the Four Seasons?" The penthouse suite looked lovely in the photos. Silence. Then, "What photos?" "Oh, just some pictures someone sent me. You and Dick in the elevator. Very romantic. I'm sure the board of directors would find them fascinating." "You bastard. You're following us now?" "I don't need to follow you, Laura. You're not nearly as discreet as you think you are." I watched Richard kick one of his flat tires, then immediately grab his foot in pain. "Besides, I've been busy with other projects." "What projects?" "Well, for starters, I've been reviewing some very interesting financial records. Did you know that over the past 6 months, approximately $2.7 million has been transferred out of employee pension funds and into a series of shell accounts?" The paper trail is fascinating. Another long silence. When Laura spoke again, her voice was smaller, more careful. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course you don't. Just like you don't know anything about the Cayman Islands account opened in your maiden name last March, or the luxury condo in downtown Austin that was purchased with company funds, but registered to a subsidiary that exists only on paper." "Jason, you need to stop this right now." "Stop what? Doing my job? Because that's all I'm doing, Laura. The board hired me to investigate financial irregularities, and I'm being very thorough." I could hear her breathing heavily on the other end of the line. Across the street, Richard had given up on his car and was gesturing wildly at a tow truck driver who'd just arrived. "What do you want?" Laura finally asked. "Want? I don't want anything. I'm just a forensic accountant doing what forensic accountants do, following the money." I paused for effect. "Though I have to say, you and Dick made it almost too easy. Most embezzlers try to be subtle. We never—" "Laura, please. I have recordings, bank statements, email chains, security footage of you accessing employee accounts after hours. Did you really think nobody would notice?" The line went quiet except for her breathing. I could practically hear the wheels turning in her head, trying to figure out how much I knew and how much I was bluffing. "I want a divorce," she said finally. "I figured as much. I've already filed the papers. They should be served Monday morning." "What about the house, the assets?" I laughed, and it felt good. Really good. "What assets, Laura? The house that's mortgaged to the hilt? The cars that are leased? The credit cards that are maxed out? Or did you mean the $200,000 you transferred out of our joint account last month? That money was stolen." "That money was stolen from the company, laundered through our personal account, and then moved offshore, which makes you an accessory to embezzlement and money laundering." I took another sip of coffee. "The FBI tends to frown on that sort of thing." "You wouldn't." "Wouldn't what?" "Report financial crimes to the appropriate authorities." "Laura, it's literally my job." Across the street, Richard was now screaming at the tow truck driver, who was shaking his head and pointing at the damaged car. Apparently, even tow truck drivers had standards. "Jason, please. We can work this out. Dick and I. It's not what you think." "Really? Because what I think is that you've been fucking your boss while helping him steal money from the people who work for him. If that's not what's happening, please enlighten me." "It's complicated." "No, Laura. It's really not. You chose Dick over me, which is fine. People fall out of love. But you also chose to help him steal money, which makes you a criminal. And criminals face consequences. What consequences? I smiled, watching Richard finally give up and storm back toward the building. Well, that depends on how cooperative you are with the federal investigation that's about to begin. Federal investigation. Did I forget to mention that? The board contacted the FBI last week. Apparently, when pension funds start disappearing, it becomes a federal matter. They'll probably want to interview you soon. The sound that came through the phone was somewhere between a sob and a scream. Jason, you can't do this to me. I'm not doing anything to you, Laura. You did this to yourself. I stood up and dropped a $5 bill on the table. You and Dick made your choices. Now you get to live with the consequences. Where are you going? To visit some old friends, people who used to respect me before last night's little show. I think it's time they learned the whole truth about our marriage. I hung up and walked out of the coffee shop, leaving Laura to contemplate her new reality. Phase 2 was about to begin, and this time, I wouldn't be the one left humiliated. The Rusty Anchor had been our regular hangout for years, a dive bar in East Austin where tech workers went to pretend they were still cool and blue-collar guys went to complain about tech workers gentrifying their neighborhood. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone's business, which made it perfect for what I had planned. I arrived at 2 p.m. sharp, knowing that Saturday afternoon was when my former friend group would be holding court in their usual corner booth. Sure enough, there they were, Mike Chen, my old college roommate who now worked in marketing at a competing firm, Sarah Williams, a project manager at Dell who'd introduced me to Laura 6 years ago, and Tom Rodriguez, a software engineer who'd been my best man at my wedding. They looked up when I approached, their expressions ranging from uncomfortable to openly hostile. Word traveled fast in Austin's tight-knit tech community, and last night's public humiliation had already made the rounds. Well, well, Mike said, not bothering to hide his smirk. If it isn't the cuckold himself. How's married life treating you, Jason? Sarah elbowed him. Mike, don't be a dick. Why not? His wife's boss already claimed that title. Mike's laugh was cruel. Seriously, Jason, how did you not see that coming? Laura's been practically advertising her affair for months. I slid into the empty seat across from them, noting how they all shifted away slightly. Actually, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. Look, man, Tom said, his voice artificially sympathetic. We're sorry about what happened last night, but you can't say you didn't have it coming. I mean, when was the last time you took Laura anywhere nice? When was the last time you bought her flowers, or surprised her with a weekend trip, or helped her embezzle $2.7 million from her company? I interrupted. The table went silent. Sarah's drink stopped halfway to her lips. What did you say? She asked. I pulled out my phone and set it on the table. I said, when was the last time I helped my wife steal nearly $3 million from employee pension funds? The answer is never, by the way. I have standards. Mike leaned forward. Jason, what the hell are you talking about? I'm talking about the real reason Laura's been working late so many nights. I'm talking about why she suddenly has designer clothes and expensive jewelry on an HR manager's salary. I'm talking about why Richard Halverson was so confident last night that he could publicly humiliate me without consequences. I opened my phone's voice memo app and selected the recording I'd made 2 weeks ago. Laura's voice filled the air around our table. When do I get my cut, Dick? I've been moving money around for 6 months now. I let it play for 30 seconds before stopping it. The expressions around the table had shifted from smug superiority to shock. Holy shit, Tom whispered. Is that real? Oh, it's real. I have hours of recordings, actually. Plus bank statements, email chains, security footage, and financial records going back 8 months. I leaned back in my chair. Turns out my wife isn't just a cheater, she's also a federal criminal. Sarah set her drink down with shaking hands. Jason, you need to take this to the police. Already done. The FBI will be making arrests Monday morning. I smiled. But I wanted to share the news with my closest friends first. Mike's face had gone pale. Dude, I'm sorry. We had no idea. Didn't you? I pulled up another recording on my phone. Because this conversation happened 3 weeks ago at Sarah's birthday party. Sarah's voice came through clearly. I don't know why Jason puts up with it. Everyone knows Laura's screwing her boss. Mike's voice followed. Maybe he likes being a cuckold. Some guys are into that. Tom's laugh was unmistakable, or maybe he's just too pathetic to do anything about it. I stopped the recording and looked around the table. So when you say you had no idea, what exactly are you referring to? The affair you all knew about? Or the fact that you were all perfectly happy to mock me behind my back while my wife was committing federal crimes? The silence stretched uncomfortably. Finally, Sarah spoke up. Jason, we were just what? Just being good friends? Just looking out for me? I stood up. You know what real friends would have done? Real friends would have told me what was happening instead of making jokes about it. You're right, Tom said quietly. We should have said something. Yes, you should have. But you didn't, because it was more fun to watch the pathetic husband get humiliated. I picked up my phone. Well, congratulations. You got quite a show last night. Mike tried to salvage the situation. Look, Jason, we're sorry. We fucked up. But you can't blame us for Laura's choices. I don't blame you for Laura's choices. I blame you for yours. I pulled out a manila envelope and dropped it on the table. Those are copies of all the evidence I've gathered. Financial records, recordings, photographs, everything. Sarah opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Her face went white as she scanned the documents. Why are you showing us this? She asked. Because I want you to understand something. Last night, you watched Richard Halverson humiliate me in front of 200 people. You probably went home and laughed about it with your spouses. Poor Jason, getting cuckolded in public. How embarrassing. I leaned forward, placing my hands on the table. But here's what you didn't know. While you were laughing at me, I was gathering evidence that's going to destroy both of them. While you were making jokes about my marriage, I was building a federal case that's going to put my wife and her lover in prison for the next decade. Tom's voice was barely a whisper. Jesus, Jason. So the next time you see someone getting publicly humiliated, maybe ask yourself if there's more to the story. Maybe consider that the pathetic cuckold might actually be the smartest person in the room. I straightened up and adjusted my jacket. Enjoy your drinks, and enjoy explaining to your coworkers on Monday why you were friends with someone who helped the FBI take down the biggest embezzlement scheme in Austin tech history. I walked away from the table, leaving them with the evidence and the dawning realization that they'd backed the wrong horse. Behind me, I could hear Sarah crying and Mike cursing under his breath. My phone buzzed as I reached the parking lot. Diana's number. Hey. Her voice was warm, concerned. I heard you were at the Anchor. Everything okay? Everything's perfect, I said, and for the first time in months, I meant it. How do you feel about helping me plan the most epic revenge in corporate history? Her laugh was music to my ears. I thought you'd never ask. Monday morning arrived, with the kind of crisp October clarity that made Austin beautiful and dangerous in equal measure. I stood in my home office, adjusting my tie and looking at the evidence that would destroy 2 lives before lunch. The files were organized, the recordings were queued, and the flash drive containing everything was safely tucked in my jacket pocket. My phone had been ringing all morning. Laura had called 16 times, Richard had called 8, and even the board chairman had left 2 voicemails asking for an urgent meeting. I ignored them all. At exactly 9 a.m., I drove to the Meridian Tower for what would be my final day as a Halverson Technologies employee. The parking garage was buzzing with FBI vehicles, unmarked sedans, and news vans. Word was already leaking. Diana was waiting for me in the lobby, looking stunning in a navy blue suit that made her red hair absolutely luminous. She handed me a coffee and a knowing smile. Ready for this? She asked. I've been ready for months. I took a sip of coffee and savored the moment. How's the mood upstairs? Panic. Richard's been screaming at his lawyers all morning, and Laura locked herself in her office. The board called an emergency meeting for 10 a.m. Mame. Perfect. That gives us time to set up. We rode the elevator to the 42nd floor in comfortable silence. The executive conference room was already buzzing with activity. Board members, lawyers, and senior staff all talking in hushed, urgent tones. Through the glass walls, I could see Richard pacing like a caged animal, while Laura sat frozen at the far end of the table. The board chairman, William Morrison, spotted me immediately. He was 70 years old, built like a linebacker, and had the kind of old-school integrity that was rapidly disappearing from corporate America. Jason, he said, striding over with purpose. We need to talk, now. I followed him into his private office, where 2 FBI agents were waiting. Special Agent Jennifer Hayes was tall, blonde, and looked like she could bench press a Buick. Her partner, Agent David Park, was smaller, but had the kind of intense focus that made suspects confess just to avoid his stare. Mr. Fairburn, Agent Hayes said, We understand you have information relevant to our investigation. I pulled out the flash drive and set it on Morrison's desk. I have everything you need to put Richard Halverson and Laura Fairburn away for the next 10 years. Agent Park leaned forward. What kind of everything? Financial records showing systematic embezzlement of employee pension funds. Audio recordings of the defendants discussing their crimes. Email chains detailing money laundering operations. Security footage of unauthorized access to company accounts. I smiled. And a complete paper trail showing how they moved $2.7 million through offshore accounts. Morrison's face was grim. How long has this been going on? 8 months, based on the evidence. But I suspect it started earlier. I looked directly at Agent Hayes. My wife has been Richard's inside person in HR, using her access to manipulate employee accounts and transfer funds. And you've been investigating this how long? Agent Park asked. Since you hired me 6 months ago to conduct a forensic audit. What I found was significantly more than simple financial irregularities. Morrison nodded slowly. We suspected something was wrong, but this, he gestured at the flash drive. This is beyond anything we imagined. Agent Hayes stood up. We'll need you to walk us through everything. Every document, every recording, every piece of evidence. Of course. But first, I have a request. What kind of request? Morrison asked. I smiled. I want to present my findings to the full board, with Richard and Laura present. I want them to hear exactly how their crimes are going to destroy them. Agent Park shook his head. That's not standard procedure. Maybe not, but they humiliated me publicly. I think I've earned the right to return the favor. Morrison considered this. The board meeting is in 20 minutes. Perfect. 20 minutes later, I stood at the head of the conference table with my laptop connected to the room's massive display screen. Richard sat at the far end, flanked by 2 expensive lawyers, who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Laura was directly across from me, her face pale and her hands shaking. The 12 board members filled the remaining seats, along with the 2 FBI agents and Diana, who was there as a witness to various conversations she'd overheard. Ladies and gentlemen, Morrison announced, Jason Fairburn will now present his findings from our requested forensic audit. I clicked to my first slide, a photo of Richard and Laura in the Four Seasons elevator, his hands all over her, both of them laughing. 6 months ago, you hired me to investigate suspected financial irregularities at Halverson Technologies. What I discovered was the largest embezzlement scheme in Austin corporate history. Richard's lawyer started to object, but Morrison cut him off with a look. Over the past 8 months, I continued, CEO Richard Halverson and HR manager Laura Fairburn have systematically stolen $2.7 million from employee pension funds, using a complex network of shell companies and offshore accounts. I clicked to the next slide. Bank records showing transfers from pension accounts to suspicious entities. The scheme worked like this. Laura would use her HR access to create phantom employees and ghost accounts. Richard would authorize transfers to these accounts for supposed consulting fees or equipment purchases. The money would then be moved through a series of shell companies before ending up in accounts controlled by both defendants. Laura was crying now, but Richard maintained his defiant posture. This is ridiculous, he said. Jason's obviously fabricating evidence because he's angry about his marriage. I smiled and clicked to the next slide. A transcript of one of their recorded conversations. Let's hear what you think about my marriage, Dick. I played the audio. Richard's voice filled the room. Don't worry, baby. Once we wrap up this audit nonsense, we'll be set. Your husband's report will give us exactly the cover we need. The board members shifted uncomfortably. Richard's face went white. What about the board? Laura's recorded voice asked. What about them? They hired your idiot husband to investigate me, and he's going to tell them exactly what I want them to hear. It's perfect. I stopped the recording and looked directly at Richard. Still think I'm fabricating evidence? Richard's lawyer whispered urgently in his ear, but Richard pushed him away. You son of a bitch. You've been recording us? For months, I confirmed. Every phone call, every meeting, every incriminating conversation. Did you really think I was too stupid to notice that my wife was suddenly wearing designer clothes on an HR salary? I clicked through slide after slide. Financial records, email chains, security footage of Laura accessing accounts after hours, photographs of Richard's luxury purchases, records of the Cayman Islands accounts. The total theft amounts to $2,743,000, I announced. Money stolen from the retirement funds of hardworking employees who trusted this company with their futures. Board member Margaret Chen raised her hand. What's the federal exposure here? Agent Hayes answered, wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, and violation of federal pension protection laws. We're looking at 10 to 15 years for each defendant. Richard finally broke. You bastard, he screamed, lunging across the table at me. You fucking bastard. Security guards restrained him as he continued shouting, you think you're so smart? You think you've won? I'll destroy you. You'll what? I asked calmly. Steal more money? Sleep with more employees' wives? Face it, Dick. You lost the moment you decided to humiliate me in public. Agent Parks stood up. Richard Halverson, Laura Fairburn, you're both under arrest. Laura Fartiaft. The next few minutes were chaos. Handcuffs, Miranda rights, lawyers shouting objections, board members demanding answers. Through it all, I stood calmly at the head of the table, watching my wife and her lover get exactly what they deserved. As they were led away, Laura looked back at me one last time. Jason, please. Goodbye, Laura, I said simply. Morrison approached me as the room cleared. Jason, the board would like to offer you Richard's position as interim CEO while we search for a permanent replacement. I looked out the window at the Austin skyline, then at Diana, who was smiling proudly. I'll consider it, I said. But first, I think I need a vacation. It's been a very long few months. Diana laughed. I know a great place in Hawaii. Very private, very far from Austin. As we walked toward the elevator, my phone buzzed with a text from Tom. Holy shit, man. Just saw the news. I'm sorry we doubted you. I deleted the message without responding. Some bridges, once burned, should stay that way. The elevator doors closed, and Diana squeezed my hand. So, she said, how does it feel to get the perfect revenge? I thought about Richard and Laura in handcuffs, about my former friends realizing they'd backed the wrong horse, about the FBI press conference that would make headlines across Texas. It feels exactly like justice, I said, and for the first time in 8 months, I meant every word.